Hello and welcome to this video on how to get the top grades using context. Now, unusually, I'm going to go through grade 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 today. So I'm going to show you the progression about how to get from one to the next. It doesn't matter what text I show you this on. It doesn't matter if you've never read the text, but I'm going to base it on A Christmas Carol. I'll show you how the indicative content works for each of the assessment objectives, but in particular AO3, which is the context one. And then I'll show you what a paragraph in a student's essay would look like at grade 5, and then another one at grade 6 and 7, another one at grade 8 and 9, and because you know I always want to get you beyond the top grades, I will give you some context that is even beyond grade 9. These are all extracts from my guide to the literature exam, which will be coming out within the next week, I expect. Okay, you don't need to have read A Christmas Carol. This extract is where the ghost of Christmas yet to come, so the ghost of the future, has taken Scrooge to see a dead body lying in a bed. And it's actually Scrooge's dead body, but Scrooge does not know this and cannot lift off the sheet over the corpse's head to see that it is in fact himself. But of course the reader does know. The scene then moves with great contrast to a couple who owe Scrooge money. And we meet the wife, who's very, very anxious because her husband has gone out to plead with Scrooge to say that they don't have enough money to pay him at this moment. And he comes back to deliver the appalling news that Scrooge is dead. But both husband and wife are secretly delighted that he's died because they're released from his cruelty, and then they think better of it because they're Christians and they suddenly feel guilty for feeling this sense of relief and joy that Scrooge is dead. Okay, so the question will look like this. Starting with this extract, that's the same for every text. Explore how, and then you get the name of the writer. Here Dickens presents, and then whatever it is. So here, Scrooge's changing beliefs in A Christmas Carol. So the indicative content might tell you all kinds of things that Scrooge believes and how he changes those beliefs during the novel, and then AO2 will show you the kind of language that you can use to prove that. But then the most useful bit is AO3. Now remember, AO3, when you use the mark scheme, will give you context which is going to be relevant whatever the question is. So revising AO3 from the indicative content of the mark scheme is a brilliant way to get top grades. So if you happen to be doing A Christmas Carol, this will be really useful to you because you'll be able to use it to get those grades. I do have to read through it with you so that you can understand the students' paragraphs. So the Christian message of the novel and the idea that we will be judged by God and admitted to heaven or punished to hell. So that's one bit of Christian context. Then we have the political message that the welfare of the poor is everyone's responsibility, and the more wealthy we are, the more we should do. So those of you studying an Inspector Calls will realise immediately that Priestley actually has this novel in mind. If you buy my guide to the Inspector Calls, you'll see how that works. And if you don't buy the guide, doesn't matter. The literary context. Now, this is an easy way for you to get into the top grades. Most students will not write about the context of other literary texts that relate to A Christmas Carol. So here we're looking at the genre of the ghost story, which can be used both to entertain and offer a didactic lesson. So ghost stories were aimed at children and they shocked them, but they also included a lesson. Which is just like the carols which are sung at Christmas. And you remember this is called A Christmas Carol and it's organised in staves. So having that kind of literary context will boost your grade to a grade 7 at least. And then we have the tradition of dramatic irony where the husband delays telling his wife Scrooge is dead. So that's in this particular scene. And you might remember the same device when Macduff is told of his wife's death in Macbeth. If you don't, doesn't matter. If you do, you can include that as context. And a context that I didn't include here, and I'm now slapping myself, is the idea of the morality play. And so all the characters in a morality play are not real, they're just there as symbols. And really, that's what's happening with the ghosts. They're not real, they're symbols of Scrooge's past, present and future, and of what a Christian view of Scrooge's past, present and future might be. Right, if we go to the mark scheme, 50% of the marks is 15 out of 30. That's where grade 5 starts. And to do that, when we look at context, you only need some understanding of context. So let's have a look at a grade 5 use of context in the essay to that question that we just looked at. So Dickens wants his readers to learn the same lesson Scrooge learns. The wife prayed for forgiveness. Remember, she wanted Scrooge dead. Now she's feeling guilty. She prayed for forgiveness because she is teaching Scrooge a lesson that he should pray for forgiveness too. Okay, so that's one bit of context. Better than that, he has a chance to put things right. As Scrooge tells the ghost, "I shall not leave its lesson." We can see Scrooge changing, so Dickens wants us to begin changing too. That's my second bit of context. One, that Scrooge needed to change, but two, Dickens therefore wants us to change. This is his campaign to change his readers to support social welfare. Right, well, grade 6 starts at 20 marks and grade 7 obviously this above. Let's have a look at what 20 marks context looks like. So now you need more than one perspective and idea and more than one contextual factor, but you've got to make specific links between the context and the writer's purpose. At grade 7 you do exactly the same, but you do so in a way that is thoughtful and developed. So really, what does that mean? It means a couple of paragraphs. So let's see what a number of interpretations which are thoughtful and developed look like. Dickens knows many of his audience are devout Christians. Consequently, so this is my precise link, he makes the wife, who is so glad at Scrooge's death, ask for forgiveness. She prayed forgiveness the next moment. So that's kind of like the grade 5, and then we're developing it. However, he ends the sentence emphasizing the emotion of her heart, because this will convince Scrooge more to change. So there's one bit of context. Coupling his Christian belief with his emotions is much more persuasive. So this links to the content. What am I talking about? The context of Dickens trying to persuade his readers to change. This is why at the end of the novel he became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good city, town or borough in the good old world. Dickens focuses on his emotional change with deliberate reference to his being good, rather than any references to forgiveness or God. Now, you're probably used to me always telling you to write about the end of the text, because that's where the author's ideas, their final ideas, are revealed, and you'll therefore be able to talk about a change in those ideas. So here we're starting to get to the idea that he's moving beyond Christian ideals and he's talking about human goodness. Well, let's develop that to show you what grade 8 and 9 looks like. Dickens has also written this ghost story, so there's the literary context, to be read aloud at Christmas. This oral tradition would be partly aimed at children and delivering a moral lesson. It's the second part of my context. This perhaps explains why the Christian message is given to a child, Tiny Tim. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us every one. Now that's a quotation that comes from the end of the novel, and I always tell my students, always have a go-to quotation from the end that you'll use whatever the essay is. However, it is significant that Dickens paid for his own illustrator, it's another bit of context, who clearly portrays the ghosts of Christmas as pagan figures. Pagan means they came before Christianity. From this perspective, Dickens is promoting beliefs which predate Christianity, Perhaps he is suggesting that the need to be good to others is a fundamentally human need. He emphasizes this with the good old world, where old tells us that his message is that the need to be good to each other is an ancient and fundamental one. Perhaps Dickens wants his readers to realize Christian faith is not enough, and instead realize that we need actions now, in the present, to look after the welfare of the poor, rather than relying on a merciful God welcoming the poor dead to heaven. Now hopefully you can see that this long quotation that I had here, where we just zoomed in on a single word good, has now changed to a much more precise quotation of the word good here, but also the word old. So I'm making more points about fewer words in the quotations, and that gives me an extra level of skill. Okay, well, I'm not going to read you through this part, which is beyond grade 9, but I'll leave it there. You can freeze the screen if you're studying this text and go for superb marks in your essays. Remember, this context will work whatever the question. Now, if we go back to the 8 and 9 context, you will see that I could take information from these paragraphs to write my thesis for any question. The questions are about Tiny Tim, I've got a way in. If they're about the ghosts, I've got a way in with the pagan figures. If they're about Christianity, I've got a way in. If it's about the welfare of the poor, I've got a way in. So writing these bits of context in advance as part of my revision is going to force me to get top grades in the exam, because I'll have everything I need to write an awesome thesis which is going to force the examiner to give me the marks. And if you don't know what I'm on about when I talk about the thesis, that's okay. I've done a video on it and I'll put the link up here. So if there are videos that you'd like me to make, put them in a comment down below. I'll see what I can do. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's get those top grades. See you soon on my channel.